Hey campers, George here, back in the man cave. I'm standing here at the college man cave workbench. The other day there was a comment on my channel. It was from Preppy890, who's a subscriber, watches the channel a lot, appreciate that. He had said that after watching my leather videos, making basic sheaths and that sort of thing, decided he wanted to try it, and he had made his first two little knife pocket slips. And I said to him, very cool, because, you know, for me, the reason I share all this stuff is for you guys. Here's what I'm going to do. Let's check it out. So like I said, Preppy890 had said he had done that. I asked him to send me some pictures of his slips that he did. And here they are right here. Very cool. Well made, way better than I did my first time out. And I thought to myself, that is so cool. I love it when I hear from you guys and you've seen me do something and thought, maybe I can do that. And really, that's what it's all about for me. If you do decide to do something that you've seen on my channel, please, I'd love to share it with everybody. Because really, like I said, it's why I do a lot of this. I like to do this stuff, and I figure if I can show other people what I'm doing, I learn every time I do something. I'm a hacker, self-taught, and I'm like, I want to try that, and I do it. Sometimes it works, sometimes not so much. Just get a hold of me. I'll put a link below to my the best way I've found right now, and the same with Preppy. I have a page on Facebook, and it's called The Novice Survivalist. And I'll put links below. Unfortunately, for some reason, it won't let you post a picture, but you can go to my personal Facebook page, and I'll put a link below, and you can get hold of me there. Just go to my latest post and comment on there, and you can actually paste the pictures, and I'll download them and we'll share them with everybody. It's so cool. That inspired me. Making a slip is a great way to start leathering. It's not a big project, doesn't take a lot, a couple of tools, and you're on your way. There's a lot to learn about leathering. Different leathers, different tools, different applications for the tools. What to use to do this, to do that. I just happen to find leather that I find works for me. And you can do the same thing. I searched Amazon, tried out different leathers, and it took me a while. But I still, to this day, the three that I found, still get them when I'm going to do certain projects. But today what I want to do, I'm going to stop talking soon, is I want to make a sheath for this guy. And I don't know if you remember it, this guy. I picked it up at a thrift store, and it's an unusual one. It's like an optional copy. I didn't even know these guys existed. Even the blade shape and everything. And it's these guys. And you can see, I believe they're out of France, right? Yeah. The brakes, and they cleaned it up and restored it. Then I thought, I need to make a sheath for it because, I like to do that. Then I got Preppy's comment, and I thought, this is going to take one of my favorite sheaths for this style of knife, and that is what I call the barrel sheath. I got the idea from Facebook on the optional page. They have an optional knife lovers or whatever, and I saw a sheath that a guy had made, and I thought, that is so cool. It's unusual and everything, and I just remembered that. Then I thought, one day I decided I'm going to make one. Couldn't remember if there was a way to make it or anything, and I just did it from memory. And my memory's not that great. And I came up with, I suppose, my version of what I call the barrel sheath. As you work along in leather, Preppy890 made that slip. His next step now is to improve the slip, to add things like the hole in there so you can put a lanyard on it and some beads on there so it's easy to pull out of your pocket. Things like that, maybe even doing some patterns on it or painting it different colors or whatever. But that's the next step. Then after that, I think a barrel sheath One of the reasons is because of the design, the sheath, the barrel doesn't have to be tight because it's all held in. And when you put it together, it includes the belt sheath. That would be a good next project for him. I was like, you know what? I need to make a video, a little bit more detailed how-to video. Enough of this chit chat. I'm going to do it. I'll put some links in that in the description. And I'm going to go through a step-by-step. Now, the leather I'm going to use on this is kind of my favorite. It's this stuff. And I'll put a link below. One of the reasons is it's plain. It hasn't been coated, colored, or anything like that. That's it. It's bare leather. I like that because I like different colors. So I buy leather dye and dye them different colors. If I can't decide on a color, they're all colors. And this allows you to do that. One of the things I did learn, leather like this, it's floppy. Okay. When you punch a hole in, leather will seal itself. It just shrinks back in and you're like, I can't get the needle in. What I found is to coat it with dye. Cut it to size, coat it, let it sit dry, and it stiffens it up really nicely so that when you punch holes, they don't close up quickly. So that's my first tip. That's what I'm going to do now. I just had some scraps, and here I have them. As always, whatever you're doing, you're going to be using sharp and shiny stuff here, punches, pokey things. Be safe. So here we are here, and I'm going to dye these. And what I use is these guys. And it is Faribault's leather dye. And they have a lot of choices. There's others out there, and there's different sizes and whatnot. I found this. The nice thing about it is when you buy them, I think I took it out. No, it's in here. It actually comes with a little applicator, which is one of these things. The cool thing is you can reuse them. For some reason, they don't stiffen up when you just make sure you get the excess out when you're done, and you can reuse them. And then I want to make this sheath, I'm using chocolate. See it there. So what I'm going to do is I'll cover this with chocolate. As always, with leather dye, it gets on your hands. It's tough to get off. So get yourself some gloves. It's always good for you. It's probably not to get that on you anyway. Do that. It stays full. You know there's no holes. It's not going to leak. Same thing again. Get a nice even coverage on it. You're not going to get that faded stuff so much on this black or dark colors. It's a little harder to get that look, but I'm going to try because I am persistent. I like to put a lot on. The more you put on, the stiffer the leather. You may find you prefer to just use the bare. Same thing again. Here you don't have to be so delicate with it because this is going to be inside the sheath. Nobody's going to see it. But I just do it because it makes everything more stiffer. So along the edges here and just let it fade in. And you're just going to let them sit. Here's the strap. Just try and get a reasonably even coverage. You know, if you want it perfect with no fading on anything, just go over the whole thing a couple of times. Experiment. That's what you need to do. As you go, you experiment. Now looking at this looks a little iffy here. This is what I do. I try to get most of it off here. By the way, doing this, have a couple of sheets of newspaper because it will seep through. And I get most of it off, which allows me to go over this really lightly and give it a little bit more consistency. While it's still a little damp, you can just get some paper and rub it, and it helps spread it a little bit more and dry it off. Now, when you put it on, you're gonna go, ooh, that's different to what I thought it was. When it dries, it'll be a little bit different, especially with different colors. I'm probably going to trim it down anyway, but I'll do this. just because I've got the excess on here and I might as well use it. These pointy pieces here are no reason at all. It's just the piece the way it was when I found it. And like I said, it doesn't take, so you're just going to wait, you know, maybe 15, 20 minutes is good for me. One of the reasons is if it's not completely dry, you come back, you don't have gloves, you start working on it, you're going to get it on your hands. Okay, it's been sitting here for about 15 minutes. It's a lot stiffer. Look at that. I just find it easier to work with when it's stiff like that. And like I said, when you punch holes in, it doesn't immediately shrink. And I'll show you right now on this non-covered piece. There's a couple of things you can use to punch holes and things like that. Here is an example. Now, if you look, this one here, are a lot wider than those ones. And it depends on what you're working with. You can get different ones. You can also get a pinwheel. I looked at the pinwheel and it never worked for me simply because I'm doing heavier stuff. You can get a heavy pinwheel. I just think this is better. I find it easier to work with. I have a soft blow hammer. And of course, you need to mark where you're going to punch the things. I'm going to mark a line down here, and we'll punch there and see if there's a difference. I'm not going to measure anything. I'm just going to put a line down there. Here's another tip. Get yourself a steel rule, okay, and make sure it has the cork backing on it. That way, it's less likely to slip than this. You see that? This will stick more, and it won't slip when you're cutting, so make sure. It's just put a line down here, and I have an awl which I found in a used store, changed the handle and prettied it up, played with it a little bit. It's not really sharp, doesn't need to be sharp, okay, just come to a reasonable point. And I'm just going to mark the leather. Now, you've got to be careful. If you don't want to leave that mark there, you're just going to have to do it really lightly. And you can barely see it there. Okay. If you do it hard, that mark is going to stay. It'll be obvious. So I'm going to do it hard here. And now you can see, definitely see it. It's pushed in the leather. Now, up here, it'll probably get less obvious, but down here not so much because we covered it. And if I rub on this, it reduces it compared to if I rub on this. When you punch through, you're going to punch along, and if you don't pay attention, you'll punch like this. So I'll show you another tip. I'm just going to put it on that line. I like to have a soft rubber backing. So I'm just going to punch a hole in here to mark it. There you can see the markings, okay? Didn't go through, but that's okay. You can always re-punch it. Now, if I want to make sure I keep that line straight, I'm going to use these last three to line it up. And it keeps it nice and straight. If you don't, I'll find that you'll be slightly off and it shows up. So I'm just going to do that. Now, if you look at the punch holes, these are not as wide open as those guys. See that? And these will tend to not shrink more. Now, if I punch, it didn't go all the way through. Now, you can re-punch it by just hitting it again. I like to use my awl. Just put it in the hole. Make sure you're vertical. Push down. It's painful because if you're doing a long run, it takes a while to do this. I'm going to do it on the non-covered. If I push this in, look at that hole, okay, compared to those. That hole is way bigger, and it will tend not to shrink as much, which makes it really easy to stitch. I'm going to use this thread, and it is a wax-covered thread. And the nice thing about it is when you're done, you snip it off and you can melt it down and hold it in, and you don't have to tie knots or anything with it. So I could probably push that through without a needle. See that? That becomes really convenient, because when you have a needle and you need a fairly big needle for this, you're putting it through there and you're coming back when you're doing a saddle stitch, you're going through that hole twice. You want the gaps because you don't want to poke into this, because if you poke into this, when you try and tighten up your stitch, it won't, because this is actually almost like a weave. So if you push through it again and you try and pull them tight, it won't because of the weave. So an awl, hammer, punches. Here you can see there's different punches. You also get a single one, it's in there, but you can get, this says 4, 5, 2. So you can get different size ones. Just going to show you 3 kinds of leather that I've worked with. This is the one we're working with now. Okay, it's fairly sturdy, pretty thick. But this one is about 3 millimeters thick. So it's fairly thick. It's not the thickest, but it's pretty thick. And it's still flexible enough. Okay, this here, look at this. Okay. And that's just plain, hasn't been colored or anything dyed. This one has been, okay? And you can see how floppy it is. Now, if you're looking for a knife sheath that you want to be sturdy, this is not going to work. You want to go with this. If you're looking for just a nice, smooth slip, this is pretty good. 2 mil. Now then there's this, okay? This was cured and given to me by a friend. It's deer skin, and it's buckskin really, and it is soft, flexible, and feels so smooth. It's beautiful, not easy to work with. Okay, punching those holes and things like that is very difficult, and you need a nice cutter. Okay, and this is I forget which one this one is. Fairly common, can get them in different sizes, small one and a big one. I like the big one. The number one tip I can give you is when you start a new project, start with a new blade. You don't want to do this. This is just a piece of scrap. Let's say I want to cut that end off and it's not sharp. And what happens is I went through there and it didn't cut through. See that? When you try to go back again, there's a good chance that you're pressing down and you do that. You see that? Now you got this piece you have to cut off. Okay. You have a nice sharp blade. This is fairly sharp. I used it to start the project. When you cut, it'll make no noise and a nice clean cut. Okay, so we start with a sharp blade. Don't throw your scraps away, because you can make things like this out of it, which is pretty cool, and practice your stitching and whatnot. Your working surface. Mine's pretty beat up because I use it for everything. I've drilled into it, I've sawed it, I've punched it. But if you get a good one, they can be pricey. One this big, you can probably pay, depending on the quality, up to $50 for it. But it's a cutting board, and it self-heals. When you cut it, the cut will heal itself up. And it's also got markings on it that you can use to make measurements and things. Here's a smaller one that I have, and it has all these things on it, which gives you information. It's got angles and all sorts of things. Get one of those. Get yourself a piece of wood that you can work with. Just any old scrap wood, as long as it's reasonably flat and soft. Don't get a hard wood. It won't work very well. You'll notice I've put everything away. Just what I know I'm going to use is on the bench. I just prefer to work that way. You're not going to get cluttered, especially when you start stitching. This cord will catch on anything within 100 feet of you. So keep that in mind. I started the project with these cut already. Now I know people are going to say, well, how did you know what size to make this? Like I said, it doesn't have to be tight. In other words, I'm going to be using a baseball stitch on this, and the idea of the baseball stitch is that when you have finished stitching, the ends will face each other like that and butt up against each other, which it's a really good way to stitch end to end. It is a very easy stitch to do. How do I know how much I need? You know, you can choose how long you want your barrel to be. This will sit in the bottom of the barrel. That's the idea, doesn't really show it, of what you want it to look like at the end, roughly. Okay. This doesn't need to be tight because this holds the knife in. So it doesn't have to be a tight fit. The way you measure, get your piece of leather, and you start at a specific point. So let's say you're going to start on the spine of the blade. Put that on the end, roll back to that position and mark it. That'll give you a very tight fit. Now, leather does stretch. No matter how tight you make it, it will still stretch over time. The trick is, if you want it really tight, you have to make that really accurate. We don't even want this tight. So if I was to roll this, you'll see what I mean. I'm starting there. You want to roll, by the way, the thickest part of what you're going to be putting in there. Look how much I have. 1/4 of an inch extra. I'm not worried about that. If this stretches a little bit, I want the knife to come in and out there fairly easy once I open the flap. Okay, it'll be covered like this. I lift the flap. I don't want to be to get it out. I want to be able to just grab it and pull it out, put it back, and it gets sealed in by the flap. When you want to do something like this, you've got to be a lot more accurate because I don't want this slipping on my handle while I'm cutting. Okay. So now we've got our pieces of leather and we're ready to go. The first thing you're going to be doing is you want to make sure this fits in there. It's not going to be a problem. Now you see how I did it? The knife is sitting like this. That's how it's going to sit in the sheath, like that. I don't want this stitching to be showing, right? So I'm going to want the stitching behind, along here, where nobody's going to see on the other side. The length of the barrel depends on the length of the knife. You can even make it a little bit shorter. How much do you want to stick out there so it's easy access to pull it out? So I'm going to use a baseball stitch here. The problem is I have to stitch it onto here. How do we do that, and what do I do first? So you've got to make some marks and punch your stitching holes before you do anything else. Here is the snap and the belt loop. Here is my knife, is going to sit in this barrel like that. You want to make sure that this is going to actually close the way you want it. I really like the idea because it's just different of this being down there and the snap is here and you pull it up so there's this long cover. I just think it's different there. So you're going to put your knife in. This is going to be the bottom of your barrel right there. This is going to go over and that's going to go over. Okay. I want that lower. So I move this down. Oops. To there. See how much lower? That's where my snap is going to be. This will be underneath. And the snap goes there. Okay. So that's where my knife is. I want my barrel there. So my barrel is going to go right there. So I need to mark that position. You can use a pencil. It'll rub off. There it is there. Everything comes with those measurements. I'm going to mark down here and punch in my stitch holes on this and sew this together. The problem is I need to sew this on there. So how do I do that when I have to sew there and I've already sewed this? That took me a while to figure out. There's my mark. This is going to come around. I want the center mark of my strap. So I'm going to measure that and mark it. Just like that. Now I have a center line marked there. I take this and I place it because I want that on that side of the center line and this edge on the other side, right? I'm going to be punching and stitching this area here. I want to stitch this bottom and that area there. So I put the center line, mark it where I want it, and now I'm going to take my punch. I want 3 holes either side of the stitch line. Come up a little bit. I like to go 1/4 inch. So I want it there, and I'm going to line these up so that I have 3 stitches there, 3 stitches there. And I'm going to punch it. I'm going to punch this. And if you look, I've punched right through. Now I can do that. Make sure it's straight. I can punch 3 on this side the same way again. Now if you look here, I have 3 holes there, 3 holes there. I'm going to make sure I punch through them, clean them up like we did on the test piece. You're going to repeat the same process here, so that when I stitch this together, I will have those holes there, which gives me close enough here where I can get a needle in there and do my stitching to stitch it onto the flap. Okay, so now you can see I've got my holes punched. These will go through there, this rolls over, and I can stitch them in there. Now you could leave it like that and just stitch them in, and this, this will probably hold in there. But this is the perfect time to do a baseball stitch, and I like to do the barrel to hold it together, because I always feel that these are not going to be enough to keep this stitched in. You see how the leather bends? I don't want that. I want to keep this together. So now we have to mark the holes on here. Same process again. Use the middle hole here as the stitch line on this side, and the same on that side. Just to be consistent. It makes it a big stitch, but it's not a big deal. You could use that one. And I'm just going to mark it. Now I've got my stitch lines. I need to punch them out. Same thing again. So now I have all my holes punched. The ones for the holding the barrel to the strap, and then I have my baseball stitch lines. So now I have my wax base thread, and you can get different colors of this. So now when you are going to do the actual stitching, this run is the length of this. Typically they say you need 7 times the length of your run. So if you go 1, 2, 3, snip it off. Here's a trick I learned watching other videos, and if you just put your thread through like that, when you stitch, a lot of the times this will come out and leave the cord behind. To stop it from doing that, if you just pull out some and put the tip through it like that, push it through, and then pull it, it won't come undone. You need to do it on both sides. You need 2 needles, and to do the baseball stitch you're going to be using both of them. And the way to start is you pick one side and you're going to go through, pull it through, and have them equal lengths. Then you're going to choose which way you're going to work. I'm going to work this way going that way. There's a reason for that. You take this one and you go over here under. Like that. Then you're going to take this one and go over and over this one and into there. When you pull it together, you want to make sure that that doesn't happen. You're going to pull that and pull the edges together. Now the best thing I've found to do is if you squish this down so that the edges are facing each other, you will get it to pull together like that. And then you're going to do the same thing again. This one, over, under. Ooh. Pull this one through. Make sure it's over there. You see how it's pulled apart? It's not a problem. Eventually, as you get further down, it'll stay together. Take the other one, and remember, we go over this one and into there. If you watch when I pull it together, it'll come together. Pull evenly, otherwise you're going to get a problem where one side will be longer than the other. Now you can see, if I push it down, the baseball stitch is starting to form. Like I said, if it comes apart, it's not a big deal. I use a little trick later on when I'm about halfway up. So I'm just going to repeat that stitch over, under, repeating it exactly the same. Otherwise, when you pull it together, and of course push it down, and you can see. Okay, I've gone a little bit further down. I want to show you that trick. Now, I had a piece of wood that I'd made and I can't find it, but you want something round like this, and you can put it in there, and it really helps when you sew. So I'm just going to keep repeating, and now you're going to find these stitches are not going to pull apart. It's starting to hold itself together. Pull it back together. You can you've got something to push down on, and you can keep your stitches reasonably consistent. And then you're going to repeat all the way up to the end here, and then we're going to go back 2 stitches. You can see I've gone up to the second to last stitch. I'm going to do one more stitch and pull it through. Then I'm going to go around here just to hold that tight and go back. I am going to go from here over to there just straight, and I'm going to go back. So that I have a straight across stitch here. And what that does is just strengthens the end here. And you can look at your stitch. Now, you can see the way it is. If I push this flat, now I've got these facing, each edge is now facing each other. If I let it go, you see a gap. You can go back with a needle and tighten, push down and tighten it up. And just come back along and tighten it up. And you can see now it's a little tighter together. It's a little untidy, but it's tighter together. I'm going to finish that, then we'll finish up the end. Now you can see it's a little tighter. It's not perfect. You could go through and line everything up perfectly. Nobody's going to see it here because it's going to be that way down. But you should do it right. Now all I'm going to do is snip these ends and burn them off with a lighter. You just want to snip off and leave enough to burn down. You can see how much I've left. And I have a lighter. And you just burn it and press it in. You now have your barrel. Now obviously you want to make sure your knife is going to fit in there. And look at that. It's actually snug. Okay. Now, you said, but you wanted it loose. Yes, I wanted it loose. Leather stretches. And it will stretch. If you want to stretch it right now, you can. All you have to do is wriggle it. And already it's loose. Look at that. It goes there. Okay, and if you're worried about, what about the belt loop? This underneath here is actually the belt loop will go underneath. So what I'm going to end up doing now is sewing this onto there. I'm going to be trimming this down to match because it's wider than I want it to be. Normally I would have trimmed it to where I want it, but I want to stitch it down first and then trim it. That's what it's going to be like. And we'll have a snap in here. Need to stitch this onto there using those previous holes that we did. Remember how I said that it will try and heal itself? Well, if you look here now, these holes are almost closed again. So I'm going to use my awl to open them up again and on here. So I've opened them up. I'm just using one needle for this. It's actually a saddle stitch. You should use two, but in this situation, we've basically got 6 stitches to do. You don't need 2 needles. You can go through, and like I said, it can be loose. It's so small, it's easy to tighten up afterwards. You need to sew it on the inside. I'm going to start from the back on this one. And remember, we put it close enough so we can get to it without having to worry about not being able to go where we want to go. Leave yourself enough at the back there. And I'm just going to get it through here. See how you can see it's all loose, and I've gone from there to there. Now I can't just pull everything tight. Squish that down. Get all your stitches pulled together. It's like that. And I'm going to go back that way. You can see I've gone down, back, down, back, down. Now I'm going to come back the other way, filling in the gaps going the other way. And now you can see the saddle stitch on it. Now I'm coming back a bit. Coming back just strengthens the stitch, and if something comes loose, it won't fall apart. Now I have the 2 on the inside here, and I can cut them off and seal them down again like we did before. So now I have the one side on. Going to repeat it on this side, and here becomes your belt loop. So there you have it. I've stitched both sides. So I have my belt loop now, and the knife is in there. Take that out. This will be coming down to there, and that comes onto there. Now I need to make those measurements. Basically, there's no more stitching. What we're going to do is now get the knife in there, in the position we want. Just like that. This comes up. The snap is going to be in here. So I want to line these up, make sure they're even, find the middle point, mark where you want your snap, and you would just use this, push a hole through into there and into here. This snap on this side, the part of the snap on this side, is going to go into here as well. So the snap comes through both this and that, which holds this there, and then this top snap snaps onto it. So I said that I made this a little bit wider. To be honest, this is the normal width I normally do it. If you look, it's almost perfect for a knife style like this, or the optional 9, that sort of thing. Make it the width of the ruler, because that's what I normally do. And here's another tip. Keep the pressure down on the rule where you're cutting and move with it, keeping the pressure, because the leather will shift. So we have those pieces. Don't throw these away. You can use them for lanyards. We have a better idea of what we're dealing with here, width-wise. So what I want to do is find the center mark here and mark this hole so that I can push it through and mark it here. Then we're going to punch a hole through both of them. So I've just got a piece of wood in here. I just pushed it in there. And we're going to line up. Remember, your knife goes in that deep. So this is going to come over and onto there. We need to find the center mark here. So we need to mark that. There's my center mark. So now I want to put this over, push everything flat, make sure this is straight. I am straight there. Now I'm going to get this. And there's my 2 holes. So I've got my knife in. I want to mark the position of the snap. But it's going to be hidden by this, so fortunately I lucked out there. Make that hole, line up the holes right there. So I know that's the position I want. Put this underneath. Make sure everything lines up straight. Like that. mark. There's where it's going to be. We have to punch these holes out so that we can use the snaps. And what snaps are we going to use? So I've decided to use just a silver snap. One of the reasons is dark silver kind of matches the whole thing. So you have a male and you have a female snap, and then you have the pins that hold them together. Remember, we're going through both of these because this is going to hold that on there. Now, before we do that, we want to shape the bottom here, because once it's snapped, you don't want to be using your knife here. You're probably going to cut something there. So we want to do that first. So I have this washer, but you can use anything that has a nice round, even surface that you can line up evenly on here. I'm going to trim this around. We will be cleaning this up with a trimming tool and then using a gum on it. Now we've got to put this on here. Remember, you want to mount them the right way, and we've got to punch the holes. These ones here, which are fairly small, I found on Amazon, and they work fine. They come in different sizes. But then I was at a swap meet, and ta-da! I found this huge set. Obviously, I'm not going to be using those, but it was $12. You want to make sure you don't want to punch too big a hole. This is the part that's going to push through the hole. You want to make sure it's almost the same size. When you push this through, it's nice and tight. I do have just a short 2x4. I like to have it for the base. It just gives me a more solid base. Gonna put this in there, and I'm good right there. And I give it a hard swat. Okay, now we are. There we go. Okay, got my hole there. This will go in there and stick through, and that's what's going to clamp it together. You'll see what I'm saying. Now we need to do the same thing here. Nice cleaner holes this time. Okay, so I've got all my holes punched. I bought my first one from Tandy, which is this one here. This is the anvil, and it came with all these different size punches. Your actual outside that everybody sees, you want to make sure you're not going to damage it when you have it on the anvil. And if you look at the anvil here, it has different sizes, and that fits right in there perfectly. So I'm going to sit this in there when I bang it together. When I'm doing the bottom piece, I don't need to worry about that. I just want to get as tight a fit as I can. So I can flip this over, slide it in here underneath, and hammer onto that. No problem, and you'll get a nice tight fit. So these will go through with the leather in between, and you're going to punch this column, this piece here, flat so that it goes over the edge here and they can't come apart. Okay, he fits right in there like that. When I punch down, it's going to squish this open and hold it together. So the first thing I've got to do is I have to get this underneath there and into that hole, sticking through. Now I've got my special punch. I put it on there. So now I'm going to do the outside, push it through the hole. And remember my anvil, I have my thingy there. I put this right in the anvil, holds it there. And now I'm going to get my, female side. Put it in there. Just like we did on there, we're going to do the same process of punching this. Do I have it the right way? Yes. Like that. On there solid. Does it snap? Perfect. There we go. Now, does the knife fit in there? But remember, leather stretches. So there we are, the basics of our leather sheath. Now we've got to clean it all up and make it pretty. We're going to have to dye the edges and everything. We need to clean them up, and there's a couple of ways you could do it. Some people will just use a light sandpaper and clean it up and get rid of the fluff. The actual way you should do it with a tool like this. And if you look at the end of this tool, it's got like a little fork groove in it, which is very sharp. And what you want to do is get rid of these sharp edges on the leather. That's what it's about, and all you have to do, but I have fluffy along here. Now, I can use this, and all you do is you put it on the edge like that, and you run it down, and it rounds off the edge and takes away the fluffy stuff. The gum I will be using later, does help a lot as well, cleaning up the edges. So that's what you do. You can go around and do it everywhere. I find using the gum normally takes care of that. What I got to do now, put dye on the edges, get that cleaned up, let it dry, and then we're going to put the gum on and rub it in and clean it all up, and then we should be done. So we're going to paint it again, all the edges. Something to remember is when it's down like that, that looks fine. When you open this up, you see this. So I like to just darken this side as well. Okay, it's dried now. So now I want to go up and use this stuff. And this is called burnishing gum. Now, people use more natural stuff, all sorts of things. I just found this really good. I found it on Amazon. It wasn't expensive. And it's lasted quite a while. And you would use this guy, which is called a burnishing tool. It's kind of an odd shape, but it works great. So all I do, without gloves, is just put a bunch on it, all the way around the edges. And don't forget here. And then just let it sit for a couple of minutes. Okay, I let it sit for a while. And now, all I'm going to do is choose one of these slots in here that fits there nicely. That one looks good. And just rub on it. You're actually forcing it in to the leather. And when you do it and you rub it, you will see that the edges start to shine. Can you see that? See how it smooths it off and it starts to shine. And it gets rid of a lot of the fluff. Rub it in. You don't have to press hard. You're just helping it get in there. And it does clean up a lot of your edging really nicely. Remember I said I wanted to show you something on this. I find that if I hold it tight and rub on it, getting that in there, pushing down on the edges, you can see it's opened it around the edge here, and it just stops the knife catching when you push it in. Get the idea? You can see how it cleans up. We're basically done. Remember that this distance determines what size belt you can use. My modified, how I do it, barrel, it's a little tight. What I'm going to do is snap it in like that, work it a little bit, and let it sit for a while. And when the leather dries and that sort of thing, it tends to stretch over time. The knife will get a lot looser in there. Very basic, what I call the barrel. Works great for arpanels, by the way. Here's something else that I like to use, and this is called Neat's Foot. It's also from Faribault. It's a leather conditioner. And what you can do is you let this sit for a week or two. It's going to start to dry out. You get this paper roll, put it on there, and rub it in, and it really reconditions the leather nicely. It'll bring it back to life, and not only that, it will stop it from cracking well, and it's called Neat's Foot oil. So I just pulled a couple out that I've made myself and done over the past year or so since I decided to start learning about this stuff. Whatever comes to mind is what I do. Here's the one we just made. Very dark. I think it goes well with the knife. That's the whole idea. Barrel style. And I've done some slight changes to them. I've done slips and even made this type of flip over for a lighter. That is basically the same thing, but this is for the sack, you can see there. Here's a modification to a barrel sheath. Also for a Swiss Army knife that I have, it was given to me. You can see I just got some colors that I thought would look cool together and did that with the plain leather. This was the reason for the colors, was I changed the scales on this so that they have red and blue. The main difference, it's square. See that? I made it square because it was a fairly thick Swiss Army knife, and I thought round, I didn't want to do that. I thought, I wonder if I can make it square, so I made the barrel square. This is one I did the other day, and this is more conventional. It's got the leather strap on the back, and it's got this big fancy thing on it, and this is actually an electrician's knife. I love these knives, and this knife is beautiful. You can see, very plain, straightforward. Basically the same thing, except not a barrel. You're basically stitching the barrel in, yet I had to stretch the leather to match the knife. And slips. These are fun projects, very easy to do. You can just use your scrap leather, and basically you can get a long thin piece, flip it over and stitch down the sides, trim it up, punch a hole in it, put a little lanyard in. Great projects, don't take very long, very simple to do, and you can practice your stitching. Same thing again, I did the same thing. This time I was using that buckskin. See this? It's so soft. It feels soft, but it's the same thing. Just stitched some spare buckskin I had and put this Higanokami in there. Here is scrap again, using a slip, but I made a modification to it. You see I put a flap over because I didn't want it to fall out. And I thought, how do I hold that down? And I just stitched a piece around there, you can see there. So this pops out, and it's a small Higanokami. Painted it different colors, and this slides in there. And in your pocket, this pulls it out easy. Difference is, on the sides here, I didn't do a saddle stitch. I did basically a cross stitch on each side. You can use a cross stitch, by the way, to butt up like we did. Here's another one, same thing again, made from that buckskin. This was a Swiss Army knife I found at a swap meet. It was in really good condition, just the scales were beat up. It was like they dragged it around. I wonder if I could find white scales. I did, switch the scales out. Very pretty little sack, one of my favorites. I didn't want to scratch it up, so I got the buckskin. This is what I was telling you about. Basically the same idea here. This, just a smaller version of this, a stubby version. And it holds a zipper. I don't know if this thing's got, needs to be filled. This is a Zippo Slim. It's not the full-size Zippo. You can do this with a full-size zipper. Very simple, saddle stitch, just stretch, get some leather, dip it in water, wrap this up, or find a piece of wood that's the same size, clamp it down on something solid, let it dry, it'll form. Very easy, simple. Love doing this. I was so excited when I discovered this. Try it out, try different things. See, here we have it, our little masterpiece we put together. Very simple, it's not perfect. I know it's a long video, but I wanted to make sure I got my point across so that you can do this. If you're not sure, you can follow this video, pause it, do what you need to do, follow it again. Maybe it'll help you and get you involved in some leather work. It's fun and it's satisfying. I wear one of my own on my belt all the time. And this is a Swiss Army knife. They work well. I've had that on there for 6 months. Hasn't fallen apart yet, which is a good thing. Just saying. You all be safe out there. when you're doing this stuff, you got those sharp knives, you got the punches, you got all sorts of things that can hurt. So please be careful. Don't forget, like, share, subscribe. You know the story. You see, I can't even get that right. Let me get that down. Okay. I will be back. I'm working on a bunch of projects. I'm going to do some knife restores. I'm sure. The other day I took a knife apart and that was a disaster. But hey, I figured it out and we got it back together. It's not perfect, but now I know what I'm dealing with. And that's how you learn. If you don't try, you'll never know. I will put everything in the description below. I want to try this, but I'm not sure if it's what I really want to do. You can go onto Amazon and buy each tool that you think you need. I will just list the ones that I had there to do this project, and they will work for a lot of projects, at least to get started and learn. Thanks for watching. Always appreciate your support. We'll see you again soon.